I actually had something different planned to talk about tonight. I'm going to try to make these pretty intensive business training calls, a little less motivational stuff that I normally do, and try to get into the nuts and bolts, if you will, of what we do. And I did have something different planned. But I think, over the weekend, I don't know if it was just me or if it was really, just out of control, but a lot of people were buzzing online, oh, I'm going to lose a sale, the competition, and they were going crazy. Can you tell me about this unit? Can you tell me about that unit? All this crazy stuff going out there. So I thought it would be a really good time to talk about the competition. Now, you might be on here saying, oh, I can't wait, this is awesome, she's going to show pictures of plates and wear and tear, and that's not at all what I'm going to do, because that's not at all the way you deal with competition. And so we're going to break it down just a little bit here tonight and see how you're looking at it and how we should look at it and how we address it. I think first of all, we have to kind of look at what are we doing? Is your glass half empty or half full? I mean, are you out there so focused on what does everybody else have that might be better than what we have? Why are you spending so much time becoming an expert on the competition? I mean, who does that? Can you imagine if you worked for, let's say, for instance, you were a salesperson for a new Honda dealership. Do you think that salesperson, all of their downtime, all they're focused on is what Toyota has? You can't be effective, guys. I don't know what's going on or why there's so much insecurity or people are so far off track. But rest assured, your attention should not be on every new bell and whistle or unit or whatever that's out there. You can't succeed that way. So why are you arguing what they have versus what we have? And I think the $64 question is, do you even understand what we have? Do you understand that we really aren't in the water business at all? That's kind of a conduit to accomplish what we set out to accomplish. I mean, if we have the owner of our company, the one, behind it all, saying, stop trying to sell water ionizers, don't you think maybe you need to stop and think about why you'd be spending so much time studying ionizers? That's not the business we're in. So, if you're inclined to always be looking, either for a greener grass or for something to be wrong or for some reason to come back and say, oh, a Nagic doesn't have everything, your days are probably limited because you don't see the full picture yet. You need to understand what it is we're trying to, get in the hands of other people. And it's not just trying to hustle a water ionizer, which is, I think, the main reason why so many people spend so much time on competition. Webster's defines competition as the effort of two or more parties acting independently to secure the business of a third party. That's the bottom line. So what do we have that they don't have? But it's really not about ionizers at all. But that's the effort of both of us. We're up against companies that, frankly, in many ways are masterful on the internet. Boy, they sling mud and they have hazmat suits and they're all over the place. And they're up against, with a Nagic, we don't do that. We don't waller in the mud. Part of that is because many of us are paid well to get out in the field and do the job, and it's not the corporate's responsibility necessarily. But the other part of that is the Japanese culture is not to play that kind of game. And so, you've got to look at, if we've got people out there that are saying they're better than we are, we define them as competition, what are we going to do about all that? There will always be competitors. Let me just get you to rest right now. There will always be quote unquote competitors. Whether you consider a Kia to be a competitor to a Jaguar is really irrelevant. They both have forward wheels. They both have a steering wheel. Hopefully they have windows. In some ways, I guess you could say they're competitors. In other ways, they're not. So is it real or perceived competition? One day, and it might be soon, who knows when, there will be a real competitor, and apples to apples and oranges to oranges. But then do you think the day is done? Do you think that when Toyota comes out with a new model, Honda says we're done? Do you think they give it up and say, well, we only have one choice to go work for Toyota? It doesn't work that way. You need to be so focused on what you have. When you think about it, I share this a lot with the team. When banks are training tellers to, recognize a counterfeit, they don't go out and get all the counterfeits and say, here, study all the counterfeits, because it changes every day, right? Now what they do is they tell them to focus and know the real deal so well that they can smell the counterfeit and they can see it coming. That's where your focus should be, on what you have, not everything else that's out there. We're heading towards Super Bowl. And rest assured, even though NFL players, have spent time strategizing. They know the plays, or try to anticipate the plays of the other team. They know all that stuff. They are not sitting there obsessing over what team has, over what they don't say, oh my gosh, we're in big trouble because they got this quarterback. They don't do that, guys. They become experts on that field. And they wear the jersey they wear, and they do it well, and that's what you need to do too. I come out of real estate. I did a whole lot of new home auctions, all over the place, and I can tell you, home builders don't just get paralyzed when one national builder opens up, half a mile from where they are. They have scouts that might go snooping around to see what are they doing to pull the home buyers into their site, but rest assured, they don't worry about it. They just keep on going. So should you. And again, Honda doesn't lose sleep over Toyota. It doesn't work that way. So why are you spending so much time trying to figure out what's going on out there? You need to know what you have so well that you speak with confidence. Sometimes people will comment on that with me. It's like, you speak with authority. Well, I'm so confident. I put the time into it. I tease and say I don't have a life. I'm not married. My kids are grown. My grandkids aren't close by. I love what I do, and I've always been inclined to do a lot of work. So I put a lot of time in. I am confident. I can speak with confidence. If you're wallowing around, you don't have the confidence, you need to understand what you got. So you need to know what you have so well that you speak with confidence, and then you learn to highlight the positives that really matter. And trust me, it's not what you might think it is. In terms of competition, in terms of losing somebody, if you will, to quote unquote a competitor, you may not realize that we lose them long before they reach the competitor. The competitors really, in many ways, are brilliant. I mean, they got all kinds of things up their sleeve, but, they bank on us being in the field and introducing people to, a paradigm shift, if you will, introducing people to electrolyzed reduced water. They bank on us being out there, and then they're on the internet dangling a carrot, right? So, we lose them long before they reach the competition. You know why? Because we don't know what they're looking for. We don't ask those questions. We just assume that they want what we have, or that they're all interested in drinking water, or they're all interested in that. We don't even know what makes them tick, right? So we don't ask the right questions, and so we're not selling the true value, or the value, in their eyes. We don't offer options from the very beginning. I'm going to tell you, I get pushed back on every time I bring this up, but it's true. We're out there. We know what we have. You got to remember, we're looking at things with an educated eye now. We're not new to this. It's been a process for us. We understand what we have with a 501 or K8. We know what we have with that. And you know what? We're taught and we're told nobody needs anything but that. That's the very best. Well, that may be great. But you know what? If you don't bring up all the options, they're going to go look for options. The bottom line is they need options, and we're not giving them to them. We're telling them what they need, and we're spitting out $4,000 or $5,000 like it's 35 cents. We're not getting to the value, and we're not giving them all the options. We don't learn to speak their language. They just glaze over. Again, we've got an educated eye on this thing. You start talking about plates, and you can drink water, and you can, clean your laundry and do your floor. I mean, my goodness, even sounds crazy to me. We start speaking all this stuff instead of asking the questions and speaking to the needs. We don't speak their language at all, and they glaze over on us. So they go online to get more educated because we didn't do it. And then we allow them to free range out there. And if they're going to the internet, oh my gosh, you know what it's like. They're really reading, and including things like I saw people asking questions online this weekend about the consumer report. It's a fake consumer report. It's not a consumer report. I mean, come on, guys. I may have shared with you on this call before. I'm a writer. That's what I do. And I've heard people say, people have asked me, can we pay you to talk against a product online? Come on, guys. You can't let them free range out there. They're going to read all kinds of nonsense. And I think it's sad that we live in a world where people will believe what they read online on the virtual bathroom wall before they'll believe what they hear eye to eye. But you've got to do your part too. You've got to be sure that you know what they're looking for. Ask the right questions. Sell the real value. Tell them every option we've got. And learn to address the needs. Because if we approach them the right way, by doing all those things, rarely, and I mean very rarely, will they make it to the competition online. And when they do, they'll ask you a few questions before you lose them, because you've already gotten inside their head. right? But if you don't, you just pour water on them and you get them to glaze over, you know, whatever it is that you do, they're probably not going to come back and ask a question before they buy it all because they feel like they've been misled. The competition, if you will, when they get them on the phone, they will tell them that they've been lied to. They will tell them all kinds of stuff. So you need to try to keep them from getting that far, right? So you've got to do your part too. And you got to watch your mouth. You know, you got to rise above it. Let me tell you something. It is never a good idea to trash your competition, ever. It's a no-no in real estate. It's actually an ethics violation in real estate. You don't talk about people. You don't look like a professional when you do it. And so it's okay to point out the differences, but it is never, ever okay to trash the competition. You're the one that ends up looking bad. You know, you end up looking unprofessional and you become so defensive that nobody would believe you, right? So you've got to learn, again, what you have so well that you speak with confidence. And I'm sure you've probably been in a situation where maybe you were asking questions about something you were considering buying, and you would have a salesperson say, you know, that's a really good point. Let me tell you about that. Instead, no, we get out encyclopedias on ionization and trash the competitor, and then we're so mad we could spit because they went off and did something we didn't want them to do. You got to do your part. So don't ever trash them, and don't be defensive. You know, the features and the functionality that you might be touting with what we have, you know, as being superior, might not even be important to them at all. You know, you need to ask them what's important to them. You know, I said last week, and I'll probably say a lot going on in this new year, that although most of us are very health conscious and we want this in people's hands because it's a healthy thing. I personally had a great turnaround in my health, and I'm passionate about that. You know what? That's not what makes most people tick. As long as most people have a copay card out there and they got quote unquote free medical care, you know, they don't care a whole lot about all that stuff. So you've got to figure out what's important to them. Is it saving money? Is it removing, cleaning chemicals from their home so their autistic child is a better shot? What is it that makes them tick? You know, and so you've got to ask the right questions. You might be addressing things defensively and unprofessionally that have nothing to do with what their concerns are. So you've got to ask those questions and watch your mouth. And one thing they all have in common, which is pretty cool, and that is they all compare themselves to us. And there's only one reason for that. And that's because we're the leader. You know, I know that, again, from real estate. When I did the real estate auctions, I was with the largest independently owned brokerage in the nation. We had, at the time, 20,000 real estate agents and like 250 offices or something like that. Everybody wanted to compare themselves to what we have because we were leading. So, you know, that's one of the most positive signs that you can see when you're looking at quote-unquote competition. Why is everybody comparing themselves to us? Why is every site you go to and that they're trying to downplay what we have, compare and tell everybody how what they have is better than what we have? It's because we're the best there is, and they know it. And they're pretty good at dominating that way. But we're dominating the market. You know, we're in the field. You and I are in the field, you know, educating people, changing the mindset about water and bottled water and all these things, and they're banking on it, right? We get them first, usually. That's usually they don't sniff around on the internet and read all this bad stuff about us and then come to us, guys. We already had them first, and we let them go. So if we get them first, how do we keep from losing them? How do we hang on to them? It's not that what anybody else has is better than what we have. You may not just understand what it is you should be selling. Sometimes we're up against the cost. You know, sometimes you hear, well, you're the reason the price is so high. And I guess I have to ask you, do you believe that we're the reason the prices are high? Maybe you do. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of that online. You know, maybe you do believe that. But, you know, in today's market, right now, today, in January of 2017, we don't have a real competitor, okay? Right now, we're comparing apples to oranges. And we aren't comparing apples to apples. One day we will. And you know what will happen when we do? The price will be in the very same ballpark as it is today. There's no way around it. It doesn't matter. You know, if Mr. Oshiro had said, well, I've got this technology and I want it, and I want to put it in shelves in Costco or whatever. First of all, think about that. You know, we have a big role in changing the mindset of people. You know, you really think that you could put together a little write-up on a box and stick it on a shelf somewhere and people would get it and buy it? It's not going to happen. They need us to be in the field. But if they did that, rest assured, You know, by the time they get through with merchandising and packaging and design engineers and distribution and the markup for the retailers and all the campaigns from ad campaigns and all that stuff, rest assured it's going to be dollar for dollar. We just happen to represent a brilliant company with an even more brilliant founder who understood we cannot get in the heads of the people. We cannot have a paradigm shift unless we're belly to belly, unless we're out there in the field. You know, and so that's an important thing. People don't understand that cost. But customer service and product service, maintenance, if you will, they're never free. Rest assured, when they pay the price, they're getting a whole lot for the money. It's not just because of you and me, although we do have a big job to do, and it doesn't end with the sale. But you know, it's not all about that. We are paid well to walk through this paradigm shift. We're paid well to be the, you know, the eyes and the ears and the company in the field to make a difference in families one at a time. And so, you know, it isn't about the cost. If you have doubts about that, then you need to think about a couple things. You know, next time you're in a grocery store and you pick up a can of peas, I want you to think about that. That probably cost 5 cents to produce. And then it had to be overhead and you know, markup in every single direction. There's nothing on the planet that doesn't have a markup. Everything you've ever bought has a markup. You know, talk about cost and prices. Oh my goodness. I was talking with somebody the other day about real estate, you know, and you know, with real estate, there comes a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, especially in a litigious world, there's a lot of risk, if you will. But the bottom line is you're paid ridiculous amounts of money to do what you do. That's the bottom line, you know. And so, but who argues that? There's a markup in everything. Everything you ever bought has a huge markup. Somebody's getting paid. So stop putting your tail between your legs and stop apologizing, because there's room in there for you and me to make a living. There's always somebody making a living on everything that's getting sold. And this product and this paradigm shift would not happen without people in the field. And so, you know, next time you hear that, you need to be able to defend it in a professional way. You know, we aren't the reason the cost is high. It would be high anyway. And when it's apples to apples, you know, it's going to be just about the same price every time. Then there might be a price war going on. I doubt we'll participate, but you know, there might be a little price war going on when it's apples to apples. The only way around that would be if you had some guy working in his garage and he really truly had apples to apples, and then he hand delivered them and he sold 3 or 4 or 5 a year. He might be able to cut the cost because there's no other cost involved. Nobody to sell it. There's no merchandising, boxing it, shipping it, nothing, no maintenance, no nothing, right? So he might be able to do that. But that's not the case today. So stop looking at, you know, to spending your time on people who aren't really competitors, and stop making apologies for where we are financially and why we make money. You know, some consumers are price driven, and there's not anything you can do about it. They're always going to be price driven. They're going to be the ones that say, yeah, I could buy a Jaguar, I could afford to buy a Jaguar, but why would I buy a Jaguar when I could buy a Kia? It's got 4 tires and a steering wheel and a brake. You know, they will always settle for less, and you know what is worse? They'll justify it. It doesn't matter how much money they have. I get so crazy, you know, and I guess maybe I learned this from real estate, but you can never tell, you know, who's going to spend money, who's not going to spend money. Just because they have money doesn't mean they're going to spend the money, and just because they don't have money doesn't mean they're not going to buy what we have. You know, it doesn't really matter how much money they have. Value is even more important to them, so we've got to sell the value. It's not as simple as a sticker price. You've got to get inside their head and sell them the value. You know, you can't guilt these people into spending more. It just won't happen. And they'll roll their eyes and try to out-argue you on science every single time. You won't, the science won't get to them either. But add the value. And if you talk about the dollars they can save, that has more, you know, impact on them, on the consumers that are simply price-driven no matter what. Emphasize the customer service and the longevity and things like that. You know, introduce all the unit options to them from the beginning. Guys, again, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear, oh, well, they only should be buying a 501 or, you know, a K8. Well, that's great. But, you know, from where I'm sitting, Enagic doesn't make anything bad. Everything we have is good. From where I'm sitting, even if they bought a Level Up R, they're still getting a whole lot more for the money than they're getting with anything else out there that I've seen. So stop being selfish and thinking, I'm not going to tell them about anything else, because if they do, that's probably all if I do, that's all they're going to buy. That's not true. But if you can show this wide range of pricing with our units from the very beginning. Rest assured, if they see something out there and they see it's in the same price rate, let's just pick our JR2, they're going to wonder, well, which one of these units in this price range is the best? But that's not what we're doing. We're going out there spitting out $4,000 to $5,000 and saying they're fools if they don't buy it, and we're not bringing up the other ones unless we can't sell them on the big stuff. That is a mistake, especially if you're dealing with consumers that are price driven. But when you throw everything else in the mix that we have, it's going to add some doubt if they go out looking, believe me. And it's also going to make these people feel like they're in more control of how they're spending that money. You remember, they're willing to settle for less, and they'll justify it. And you and I have heard it all day long. Well, they'll go out and buy a different ionizer, and they'll justify it. They really don't care because it came down to price, right? So there's some people out there, that's all that matters to them, and nothing you can do is going to change that. So you have to learn to work with what makes them tick. One of the biggest things is telling them about all the options. When you purchase a luxury car, it goes well beyond the quality of the car. We need to learn how to market to consumers' needs more than we're doing, right? Because, there's so much more that goes with our business and with what they purchase than just the ionizer. But in the car business, for instance, they might offer 24/7 service. They might actually offer a free luxury car loaner. They might have wine in the waiting room. They might have it detail your car when it goes in for service. They might have free oil change. And the list goes on and on and on. Why they do that? Because people, when they buy a luxury car, they want to know they bought a luxury. They want to be treated like somebody worthy of buying a luxury car. So what's the point I'm making? They don't just go out and buy Jaguar or Rolls or whatever that thing is just because. They go to the whole picture. It's not just the item that they bought, if you will. And it's not just the ionizer that they buy with us. So we've got to learn, to market to the consumer instead of just selling, what we do. We've got to learn to get inside their head what makes them feel good. And I'm about to share with you what makes those consumers tick. But there's a whole bigger picture that goes into buying the best of whatever it is. I have to remind you, if you don't want people out there shopping on the internet, on the virtual bathroom wall, then you need to stop sending them there. Guys, there are a lot of good tools out there. There's a lot of good links out. There's a lot of stuff we can send them, okay? But people sometimes don't think about it, and they just kind of blindly send them out, oh, yeah, I'm going to send you this video, and they don't pay attention to what video they sent, and when they finish watching that video, that's a great presentation for an adjunct, right behind it is something for Life Ionizer. We don't pay attention to that. And if you're not using EWS that has the videos embedded, then you need to be careful. You don't just send people out on the internet. It's like a bathroom wall. We're paid well to represent an adjunct and to work with the consumers. So, are you trying to let the internet, are you copping out and just hoping it'll do all the heavy lifting for you? You can't do that. You've got to direct them, prepare them. For me, I'll do something like, I'll say, you look like somebody that might like to do their research. Is that correct? Well, what are they going to say? Most of the time they're going to say, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I say, well, I just have to ask you then, if you like to do research, do you like to read other people's opinions and blogs and things like that? Or do you like to read the hardcore articles in science? Which way would you? Let me tell you something. Only a moron would say, no, I like reading blogs. They don't tell me that. And they're not going to tell you that. So what I'm doing is I said, you know what, I just thought that would be true for you. So let me tell you where you got to go to get the real stuff. And then I point them to basically Google Scholar and tell them to search for, in my case, I would say electrolytes reduced water. And it comes up, it's ridiculous, tens of thousands of articles, right? But what am I doing when I do that? I'm directing them. I'm kind of making light of, you want to read people's blogs and people's opinions, or do you want the real stuff? And so I am directing them. So if they come back and say, oh my God, I went on there and I saw this guy in a hazmat suit, I'm going to laugh. I'm going to say, yeah, I told you about those blogs and people's opinions. Isn't that crazy stuff? What'd you find on Google Scholar? See, you've got to direct them. You got to take control of it. The internet can be your best friend or your worst enemy. But the one thing that really gets us in trouble is people aren't mindful. They say, well, let them go do their research. No, you don't let them go do the research. You got to be sure they're researching real stuff. And so you've got to direct them. and prepare them. You know, before I knew about Google Scholar, I'd say, I'm going to send you some sites, but I'm going to warn you right now, man, it's like a bathroom wall. You'll see all kinds of weird stuff. You'll see a guy in a hazmat suit. They try to scare stew out of you over salt. You know, I mean, I would prepare them so when they saw the weird stuff, hopefully they'd remember me telling them and they'd laugh about it. But if you don't want them shopping around, going wherever, doing their stuff and listening to lies, then you need to take control of what they're looking at as best you possibly can. Don't rely on the internet to do your job, because trust me, those guys are out there and they can paint a pretty good picture of stuff, okay? So you do not want people just out there snooping around. The truth can't be found there. So what appeals to consumers? Well, first of all, guys, I'm going to tell you, it's not the plates, the solid plates, or the ORP, or the how purple the pH drops are, and any of that stuff. I mean, the demos are important. These are important things, right? But when it comes down to you've opened their mind about the need for, you know, quality water and for, you know, ionization, believe me, they're not thinking, you know, oh, it's got 11 plates, it's got 8 plates, it's got 3 plates. Remember what you hear in Sales 101, and that is that people always buy into you, okay? So that stuff, it really isn't what's important. Let me tell you what appeals to consumers across the board, whatever business you're in. They want to feel in control of the transaction. You know, think about it again. When you've gone into, let's say, for instance, you go into a car dealership and they're, you know, driving you a little crazy, trying to figure out what makes you tick. They're going to give you choices so you feel more in control. They're going to ask you questions. So how important is leather to you? Do you like a sunroof? You know, they're going to ask questions so you feel more in control of that transaction. They're going to paint that picture so that when you let loose of your money, you feel like you let loose of it and they didn't take it from you. They always, 1,000% of the time, they want options, and most of the time, we're not giving it to them, okay? They want options. They want to feel good about the money they're spending, and when they do, they'll spend more than you ever expected them to spend. And I can tell you, coming out of the real estate auction business, you know, people will often think about real estate as distress and bottom fishers and all that, but if you're pretty good at marketing, and I'm patting myself on the back, I could spin things, right? Believe me, they always spent, I sold 5,000 properties. I never fell short. They always spent more than I expected them to spend. Why? Because they felt good about the money they were spending. They thought they were getting a deal, in other words, but it made them feel good about it, so they spent more. And so people will always surprise you if they feel good about it. You know, they want to have confidence in their investment. Let me tell you something. Money's not easy to come by. It never was. It's even harder with the economy, you know, shifting on everybody. They want to feel confident in that investment. And you and I might be so close to it that we're thinking, well, what's the big deal? Look what you're getting for $5,000. It's a lot of money, okay? And they want to have confidence in that investment, which is one thing, by the way, that those quote-unquote competitors are kind of singing to. They're singing the tune of, but wait a minute, you have not only do we have something better as a lifetime warranty. Now, you and I know that's junk. Nobody can offer you a lifetime unlimited warranty, and we know the truth behind it, but that's not what the consumer hears. So they're falling into that. They have more confidence in the investment because they're falling into all that. They also want a proven player. And you know what? Nobody can catch up to that. I mean, we are the only proven player. There may be some third-party sales company out there, like Life Ionizers, for instance. You know, none of those people are actually manufacturing their product. They're all third-party sales companies. So there might be one that's out there, whatever. No, we've been in business 43 years. You know, how proven do you want, right? And they want to know the what-ifs. Now, it doesn't matter if they're spending $4 or $40 or $400 or $4,000, and you and I are no different. Well, what if I get it and I don't like it? Well, what if I get it and it breaks? What happens if it doesn't work anymore? What do I do? They want to know about those what ifs. So think about the things on this list, guys. They want to feel in control. They want options. They want to feel good about the money they're spending. They want to have confidence in the investment. They want to know that they're dealing with a reputable, proven company, and they want to know what happens if something happens. So if you think about that, why are you spending time over there comparing plates and ORP? What are you doing? Because that's not even on the radar screen for these people. You need to talk to what's important to them. And, you know, you can look at any entrepreneur magazine, read any report you want. It doesn't matter what you're selling. This is what consumers are looking for. And the rest is just secondary, really. So it's whether you do a good job and whether you understand the value to talk to it and whether you're asking the right questions. That's all a given. After that, this is what consumers want. And so you've got to focus on that. So what we have, guys, nobody else has. And guess what? They never will. We are that proven player. We've got lots of options we need to start talking about. Nobody's ever going to how's anybody going to catch up with 43 years of history? What are they going to do? We need to go through a time warp. They're never going to catch up with 43 years of history. And in 43 years, you look at people, doing business. We used to say this in real estate. You've been out there 43 years and you still have a good reputation, and we're global. And that's pretty amazing, right? So 43 years of integrity, in other words. We are, again, the manufacturer. We're not a third-party sales company. And that's something, again, if you think about what I just shared with you that consumers want, that's a big deal because the person they bought from really is not responsible for anything except selling it to them. And they don't understand that. They don't understand that they're a third-party company that they're talking to. So we are, you don't, again, trash them, but you emphasize the fact that we are the only company in the U.S. that, manufactures, sells, and services our units. That's what you need to focus on. And especially these days, God bless the USA. That's going to be very important to them. It doesn't really matter that it's assembled in Japan. What matters is it's sold, it's serviced, everything happens here in the U.S., right? And so you need to focus on that. And one thing that we have going for us is we have been around long enough that we know, an estimated longevity of our units, if it's well cared for, of course. It doesn't mean you can just not clean it or whatever. We've been around long enough to know the longevity, the expectation. Nobody else can say that. They haven't been around long enough, right? So we can say with confidence, we could have them on the phone to people. I mean, I remember hearing about a unit that went into Torrance. It was 28 years old. I mean, Mr. O just got a new unit last year. It just was still kicking. And so, we've been around long enough to speak with authority and confidence about the longevity of that investment, right? And we have service centers. My niece bought a unit. She was going to teach in Korea. And she had been to the U.S. She wanted a unit, no doubt about it. She wanted that unit and everything. And so long story short, she got one. But we were looking at, shipping to Korea. And the shipping for a unit to Korea was $600. So she coordinated, so when she came home, she picked it up. But the bottom line, it was $600. And guess what? If you deal with most of the people that you think are competition and the unit breaks, it goes back to Korea. It doesn't go back to the person they bought from. So how many people are going to do that? We have U.S. service centers, and frankly, they're really, 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 really good. So if you look at this list of the things that we have that nobody else has, guess what? We didn't even talk about devices, okay? We're not in the water business. We need to stop trying to sell water devices and sell the value. So what we have is sings right to what consumers are looking for. And we haven't even talked about the details of the devices. We haven't gotten in the ditch where everybody seems to like to go. Well, how many plates? Were they mesh plates? Were they solid plates? Come on, guys. Most consumers don't know the difference, and they frankly don't care. And so we need to speak to what really does matter to them. So I guess the question is, will you become an expert in what we have so that you can build unshakable faith? Or will you be an expert in every other device on the market? Only you can answer that, but I can tell you, you aren't going to get paid to be an expert in every other device on the market, and it's going to change every day because we are making great strides in that paradigm shift. There's a million reasons why people need what we have. A million reasons. And some of them, frankly, is not health or consuming water. Sometimes it's just to, relieve the environment. There's a million reasons. So will you be an expert in all that mess? Or will you start, talking to the needs, giving consumers what they want? It's time to start believing in what you have. And as long as you're out there spending all that time researching all those other people, I don't believe you believe what you have. It's time to walk and to talk with confidence. If it means that you got to put in a little bit more time to understand what we have, if it means you got to plug in to calls like this to understand what we have, really doesn't matter. It's time for you to put the time into you and your business and not the time in to studying what everybody else has. It's time to be proud of what you have. Let me tell you something. If you would ever guess in a million billion years, I would never be in this industry, and I certainly wouldn't be in this business, but I am so proud to be part of what we have. And I don't care if there were 50 companies out there that had exactly the same unit with a different name, I'd still be proud of what we have because I know what we stand for is far beyond selling a water ionizer. We're spreading true health with compassion globally, and that includes a whole lot more than trying to hustle an ionizer. So it's time for the business to go from your head to your heart. And I have to tell you, for speaking from experience and experience for myself and looking around me, until the business goes from your head to your heart, you're going to struggle and struggle and focus on stuff that doesn't make a whole lot of sense at all. So stop getting ready to get ready to do something and just do something. You know, invest in yourself and in your own business, and then time to things that can be productive and fruitful and make you money. You know, don't be spending time in the ditch over there looking at things that make no difference at all. Remember what consumers want. And, you know, you're trying to talk well beyond the sale, and you're also talking to them about things that they don't even understand. You're not hitting it straight on. So will you quit worrying about the competition and focus more on what you have? Only you can answer that. But I say until you do, you're going to struggle. And so now would be a good time. I'm going to open it up. Anybody has questions about, you know, dealing with competition or structuring a sale or anything about the topic tonight, I'm more than happy to answer it, and I've got a ton of people on the line that are probably even better suited to answer it than I would be. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to raise your hand, and I'll open you up one by one. Anybody out there, questions or comments? Okay, we've got Pat Cassidy. Hold on, Pat. You should be open mic now. You with me, Pat?
Hey, Lynn, great points. I said great points about the competition. And one thing that that people really need to focus on is to find out what's important to people. Because, I mean, let's say that you're an automobile salesman. If you're talking to somebody that doesn't need a car, doesn't want a car, doesn't have a driver's license, has no interest, you're just wasting your time initially. But one very important thing is to find out if there's a central theme that connects you to that other person. And also, you've got to just kind of like back off a little bit and ask the right questions. And people are interested in things that are revolving around kids,
Right.
safety in the home, toxicity in the home, saving money, the toxicity of bottled water.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that you can talk to people about to find out what their level of interest might be. And then you can shape an approach based on that.
Right.
The better you can profile somebody, the more successful that you're going to be.
Absolutely.
And it's always about them. I mean, you know, it's never about us. And I know I'm as guilty as anybody out there, you know, because we know too much.
Mm-hmm.
And people, for most people, they don't understand half of what we're saying. So we have to kind of throttle back a little bit and find out what's really important to that person. And that person may be completely the wrong person to talk about. They may not drink water. They may not be interested in that. And so you talk about something else. But every once in a while you find people that you click with.
Absolutely.
And you can walk into a room of 25 people and only find a couple of people that really are on your wavelength. And, you know, those are the people you need to spend some time with.
That's right.
And so anyway, I appreciate all your points about this competition thing. And one last thing that I'd like to say is that the more units that you place in people's homes, the more bulletproof you're going to be. And you're going to find out that you have spent a lot of time with these people, taking them from 0 to 100%, but these people fall in love with these machines.
Right.
If you do it right, you have people that absolutely fall in love with this technology and what they can do, and they wouldn't give that machine back. You couldn't pry it out of their hands.
Right.
I guess what I'm saying is that I appreciate what you're saying. It's a great topic tonight, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your input, Pat. And it's, you know, very well said, my friend. And, you know, that you just prompted me to say something else, and that is we so often, I said we lose them before they get to the competition, but we also drop the ball. You know, guys, if you're not used to a sales process, if you will, understand this, that you never, ever get off the phone or leave their home or leave water with them without a next step planned. You've got to have a next step. You see, we're out there, oh, I gave them water, what you think's going to happen? You know, oh, I gave them a gallon of water, you know, 2 weeks ago and they didn't buy anything. Well, how ridiculous is that? Come on, guys. The whole point is it's a process. You know, if you think about when you went into, you know, let's use that car thing. You went into a car dealership and you looked at the car. I mean, we don't like that heavy-handed thing. I don't like it any more than you do. But I can tell you this, they are determined. You're on the lot. You're here to buy a car. You said you're qualified. Let's sell you a car. I mean, they're trying to get it done while you're still there so you don't flop around and go down to a competitor or whatever, because the likelihood of you coming back is pretty slim. And so you've got to keep that in mind and always have that next step planned. You know, get out your calendar. Okay, I'm going to meet you at 10 o'clock on Thursday. You know, you've got to have a next step or they're going to go flopping around and looking around and they're going to believe nonsense that they read on the internet. And frankly, that's the biggest disservice you can do for somebody, is allow them to be deceived, okay? So you've got to do your part too. It's not simple. It is a process, and maybe you've never done it before, and there's no shame in that. The shame is pretending like you know what you're doing and not, okay? There's shame in that, but there's no shame in saying, tell me the process. What's the step-by-step? What should I be doing? There's no shame in not knowing that. But if you're not seeing the results, trust me, you probably don't know that. And so, again, talk to those needs. You don't let people know what they need or what makes them tick, or you can't sell the value unless you understand what it looks like to them. And that's the bottom line. So anybody else out there? Questions, comments? This is your time. Raise your hand. Okay, I see Daryl Upton. 1 second, my friend. You should be open mic. Daryl, you with me? You might be muted on your end. Daryl, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just provoked. You know, the light kind of came on when you were talking about how we don't want to be negative about other machines.
Mm-hmm.
It's my hope and dream to open a hydration store here in Swim.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had a kind of an epiphany. And tell me if you think this would be a good idea. To have you know, a pre-printed card that we can put in people's hands when they walk away about what to look for in an ionizer. You know, does it have certification? What is the quality level of that unit? How long has that company been in business? And these different bullet points. So if that person does have a tendency to sit down at the internet, they're kind of pre-programmed to go and ask or look at certain questions in respect to other units.
Right.
Or to ionizers in general.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you made me think about something. You know, years ago, I actually had a certification program that I came up with for realtors to become certified auction specialists, and it was very self-serving, believe me. But the bottom line is, I would walk them through, what's the process look like? You know, what should you expect in an auction, and what should you look for in an auctioneer? Well, guess what? I knew there weren't many people in the country that could meet those qualifications. And so that's basically what you're saying. You're kind of setting them up. What should you look for? And I think that I would stress I don't think I would say, well, you know, anything like, well, ours has this many plates and I wouldn't even go there. I would just brag about 43 years of history, a proven player, the leader in the ionization industry globally. I would, yeah, absolutely, because then they're going to be looking for those things. Even the certifications, I mean, some of these guys are out there, they got, you know, bogus certificates, and they're just crazy what's going on out there. So you've got to remember that to look at the whole process with that naked eye that you had when you first got in, you know, but we're coming at them with this whole litany of stuff that's like, oh my gosh, I'm telling you what consumers want. And you could even say we have the broadest range of products, whatever. But I think that's an excellent idea. I would say yes, absolutely, Daryl, that's a great idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else? Just raise your hand. I'm scrolling through this long list looking for hands. So if I'm taking my time reaching you, bear with me here. Anybody else? Last call. Oh, I see Jeannie Moore. Hold on 1 second, hon. Okay, Jeannie, you should be open mic.
I just want to say thank you so much for the information. It's great.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you so much. That makes me feel good. I'm glad you got a nugget that will help you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks, Jeannie. Okay, I see Elizabeth's hand up. 1 second. Elizabeth, you should be open mic. You there?
Hey, Lynn, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for the webinar tonight. I really enjoyed it.
Well, awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad you did. I hope you got a nugget or two that'll help you along the way. That's cool.
Yes, I've picked up a lot of information. I do have a question, though. As far as competition, how do you overcome the competition of the person's self? I keep coming across sick people, and the competition is they want to be sick.
Well, you know what? If I had an answer for that one, I'd probably be a very wealthy woman. Because
I mean, I'm trying to reach their core by, you know, it's of wanting to live and wanting to live the best life that you can.
Right, right. Well, you know, sometimes I get in trouble for saying what I say, and that is, I mean, a lot of you people, a lot of you don't know me, okay? I am a good definition of a compassionate woman, okay? I do care. I take home strays. It's crazy how I live, right? But I'm in business. And I know there's a side of what I do that's just showing that compassion to people like you're talking about. But frankly, one of the saddest things I see in life is people who like to be sick. That's their identity. That's how they get attention. I don't know what goes on and why they tick that way, but you know, that's what makes them feel good. And you got to frankly walk away. They don't want to be better. You shouldn't feel bad about not making them better. And so I think you just introduce it and say, well, if you change your mind, if you decide to get proactive with your health, give me a call. I'm always here to help you, and keep moving on. I'm a firm believer that as I build my business, I need to focus more on people who aren't sick or people who just don't want to get sick, okay? I want to keep my health. You know, they might say things like, oh my gosh, both my parents had Alzheimer's. I'm scared to death. Well, let's start working on it. You know, not the people that we'd be inclined to think about, the sick people. A lot of them don't want help. And so extend compassion, close the door, and keep moving. Somebody does want your help. And as long as we waller with people that don't want help, we can't help people that do want help. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but that's my...
You did. You did. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, hon. I'm muting you back out. Anybody else before we conclude? Now's your time. I mean, if I can't answer, somebody on here can. So if you've got a question, then please feel free to raise your hand. And this truly is the last call, because I said that and then 2 people popped up. This is truly the last call. And I don't see anybody out there. So guys, I just want to thank you for being on the call tonight. I hope there was a nugget there that might benefit you. Again, this is our team call. It'll be taking place every Monday night at 7 p.m., kind of like our Monday night meetings did in my home, but now it's going to be virtual. Feel free to pass it along. Again, we're going to try to stay in the nuts and bolts of our business, and you know, not so much of the motivational stuff I do on some of the other calls. This is really nuts and bolts. So I appreciate you being here. God bless you all. Have a great evening. I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.